Hello everyone, this is Goosebumps Godzilla, and today I'm going to be talking about the Batman vs. Superman of Goosebumps, and that is Mr. Wood versus Slappy. So viewer beware, you're in for a scare, and let's get started. Okay, so before I actually get into the fight and who would win and all that, let's first talk about the stats of each character in the Goosebumps books, and mostly the Night of the Living Dummy books. So, first, let's talk about the less popular ventriloquist dummy, and that is Mr. Wood. Okay, so Mr. Wood, I think, pretty much has the same powers as Slappy. They both can fire the green vomit and do a lot of the same things that Slappy can do. So, I think Mr. Wood, power-wise, just in not attacking, but just using his powers and stuff like that, they have the same sort of kind. But Mr. Wood honestly doesn't use his powers as much as Slappy does, as we can see in the Night of the Living Dummy book. When he's chasing, I believe, or is he being chased? I think he's chasing the main protagonist in the Night of the Living Dummy books. I could be wrong. He could be being chased by the main protagonist, but I'm pretty sure he's chasing them. Anyway, he was chasing, actually, or, I'm so sorry, guys, but, he's running away. He's running for, or running away from the main protagonist in the Night of the Living Dummy books. He could have easily just froze time like Slappy does, make it so that the two main protagonists couldn't move, and then he'd, make them his servants for all of their life. But, he instead started running and doing all that stuff, which honestly is totally different from what Slappy would do, and I think overall he has a reluctance to use his powers, because also, just not even talking about that scene, in other scenes, he also just does not use his powers. I mean, when he was going to kill the family dog in the book, he went ahead and used his physical strength instead of using his powers like something Slappy would do, because Slappy uses his powers to give him an advantage in the fight, while Mr. Wood does not really use his powers half as much. And so, honestly, Mr. Wood only uses powers when he absolutely needs to. And most of the time, he does not absolutely need to, so he just uses his physical strength to his advantage. And that's another point I want to say in this fight. And that is that Mr. Wood is physically stronger than Slappy. As I said before, Mr. Wood's sort of at a disadvantage, because he has a reluctance to use his powers, which are super, super powerful. And it's kind of strange that he won't use them as much as Slappy, but he is physically stronger than Slappy. Slappy, honestly, while being very, very powerful in his own way, is not physically powerful. Every time he tries to go up against, a fight, one-on-one with no powers, against one of the kids that he tries to make his servants, he usually gets defeated, and then he uses his powers or something like that to his advantage to make him win. And so, it doesn't really give him that huge an advantage if they both don't use powers, because, again, Slappy is not that physically powerful. We can also see in Night of the Living Dummy 3, Goosebumps episode, he kind of easily gets defeated by the dummy that he brought to life. He was sort of not expecting it, so I will give Slappy credit for that, but in a one-on-one fight with no powers, Mr. Wood will definitely destroy him, because Mr. Wood, as we can see in the Goosebumps trading card right here, is actually trying to strangle one of the main protagonists in the book. And usually, for Slappy, when this happens, the main protagonist will kind of, I wouldn't say with ease, because it wouldn't be with ease, but they would have an easier time getting Slappy off of them than they would with Mr. Wood, as we can see in this Goosebumps trading card, even though I think they do get him off eventually. So, overall though, Mr. Wood is physically more powerful than Slappy, but he does have a reluctance to use his powers, which would not be that good for him in the fight, but what is his intelligence? I'm not really sure, since he only appeared in Goosebumps books like twice. And in the other one, he was just like a small appearance, and that was in the Escape from Carnival of Horrors, where he actually teamed up with Slappy. But honestly, I wouldn't say it's as great as Slappy's. More on that later. Mr. Wood does make up with that in physical strength, and also his aggression, because Mr. Wood kind of goes for the throat, while Slappy kind of sits back, gets the main protagonist in trouble and all that stuff. I'm not saying Mr. Wood doesn't do that. Mr. Wood most definitely does do that a little bit in the Night of the Living Dummy book, when he's the main antagonist, but not half as much as Slappy. Slappy waits for long periods of time, causing all this trouble and stuff like that. It kind of changed in the recent books, when he's revealing himself to be alive right in front of the family and stuff like that. But in the older Goosebumps books, and for most of his run in the Goosebumps franchise, he keeps it all a secret and stuff like that. While Mr. Wood is a lot more aggressive, and he gets to the point very fast that he wants them to be his slaves for life and stuff like that. Mr. Wood does have a huge advantage in this fight because of this, and Slappy deals with things a lot more, smarter, I guess you could say, because, he sits back, relaxes, and waits till all the odds are in his favor before he actually goes out and starts attacking everyone and causing havoc. But, again, as I said before, this kind of changed in recent books. But overall, as I said before, Mr. Wood is a whole lot more aggressive than Slappy, and this proves to be an advantage in the fight, because if Slappy pretends like he's dead, not dead, but, not living, like he did in Night of the Living Dummy books, and Mr. Wood does actually know that Slappy is a living and they do have to fight, then Mr. Wood would utterly wipe the floor with Slappy, because while Slappy's just pretending to be dead or something like that, not dead, but as I said before, a non-living, then Mr. Wood would just knock his head onto the ground, crack it open. But also, there is a thing about Mr. Wood that we should say and talk about, and that is, can he come back to life? We know Slappy, even if his head gets cracked open, just as in the scenario I just said before, Slappy will come back. In the Ghost of Slappy, he turns into a ghost, and this actually makes him more powerful than he usually is. And on the book itself, I think it was on the back of the book, where you can read the blurb about the book and stuff like that, the main plot, it said that it was Slappy's most powerful version. So, that probably would not be too good for Mr. Wood. But what happens if Mr. Wood's head got cracked open? In the Night of the Living Dummy book, his head did get cracked open. Not cracked open, but he was crushed by that steamroller, I believe. So, and he did not come back. So you would think that he cannot come back to life, his spirit won't go inside another person's body like Slappy did in Bride of the Living Dummy, or he won't turn into a ghost like Slappy did in the Ghost of Slappy, but he did come back multiple times, as we can see in Goosebumps Horror Town when he comes back. Also, in the Escape from the Carnival of Horrors, Mr. Wood's back. So, Mr. Wood can come back to life. I don't know about him turning into a ghost, but since he's, again, made by the same person who made Slappy and all that stuff, I would say that he does sort of have the same after-death sort of things. Once his body's destroyed, his spirit will turn into a ghost, and maybe it'd be like a Ghost of Slappy versus a Ghost of Mr. Wood fight in the end of this fight. I'm not really sure, but that would also make sense. And so, yeah, that's sort of all I'm going to talk about for Mr. Wood, and it's now time to talk about the most popular Goosebumps character, and that is Slappy. So, Slappy has pretty much appeared in all of the Night of the Living Dummy books. He has appeared in all the Night of the Living Dummy books. And so, overall, he's got some amazing powers. Same as Mr. Wood, pretty much. He can freeze time, he can levitate other things, he can control other people, he can spew out green slime, he can do a whole lot of other things. And what makes him different from Mr. Wood, though, is his different personality in the way he gets rid of his victims. Slappy is not half as physically powerful as Mr. Wood, because of multiple reasons. I don't really know why, but he just didn't. I'm so sorry, guys. I just said for multiple reasons, and then I have no reasons. I'm so sorry about that, guys. But he is less powerful physically as Mr. Wood, since he really doesn't even fight and stuff like that. But honestly, he doesn't need to. I mean, he uses his powers a lot more than Mr. Wood, which is a huge advantage for him, but also he's a whole lot more intelligent than Mr. Wood. Slappy can easily outsmart people. I mean, he pretty much outsmarted me in Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween. I know it technically counts for his powers, I guess. So he tricked me because in the movie, when they were gonna bring Slappy back to sleep, the main character was reading the words. Basically, the first time a person said it, Slappy was like, "Don't say it again," and then the main character said the words again and brought Slappy back to life, pretty much. So, in my honest opinion, I think Slappy tricked the main character and tricked me from watching it. Took me a little while to realize this. Just say it again so he'd be brought back to life. And that's why the magic words didn't work in Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween. And when I actually came to a realization of this, I was utterly shocked. And so that just proves, I think, how smart Slappy is. I mean, he tricks multiple people, and people who are not as smart as him, Slappy uses to his advantage. And also is sort of a better leader than, I would say, Mr. Wood, because Slappy, in the Goosebumps movies, I keep talking about this as evidence that he's powerful, but it's an important point that he is the leader. He leads all the monsters, and is honestly very, very powerful. Overall, I really like Slappy in the books that he's in when he outsmarts everyone. I think that's really fun to watch. So there is a slight disadvantage for Slappy, and that is he's a little cocky. He keeps thinking that he's the best and stuff like that. And, that could be a slight disadvantage for him when he goes up against Mr. Wood, because he won't try half as hard. We can see this in The Dummy Meets the Mummy. He's in a fight against Erogotus the Mummy. I don't really know if that's the real way to pronounce his name, I'm not really sure, but anyway, Slappy goes up head-to-head against Erogotus the Mummy, and is just cracking jokes while, Erogotus is, slamming Slappy's head against the wall or something like that. And that was a previous way of how he died in The Night of the Dummy 2, so I'm not really sure how he just, was just laughing all the whole while. And I think that's because he's a little cocky, so that could be a disadvantage for him in this fight, but it's really not that big of a disadvantage, but it is still a disadvantage. And also, it's sort of the same thing, and that is, he does not take things half as seriously, while Mr. Wood does. And so, overall though, Slappy's incredibly powerful. He does have a slight disadvantage because he's weaker physically, and he also does not really use his not his powers, but he, gets a little cocky and stuff like that, but he's hugely intelligent and is so good at using variables to his advantage. But anyway, this is part 1 of my Mr. Wood versus Slappy fight. I'm gonna get to the actual fight and who would win in the next part, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that is the end.